Welcome to Biology, the scientific study of life. The cardiac cycle. A defect in one or more valves causes a condition known as a heart murmur, which may be detectable as a hissing sound when a stream of blood sequay backward through a valve. Some people are born with heart murmur. In others, the valves may be damaged by infection from rheumatic fever. For instance, most heart murmur do not reduce the efficiency of blood flow enough to warrant surgery. Maintaining the heart's rhythmic beat. The timely delivery of oxygen to the body's organs is critical. For example, brain cells die within a few minutes if their oxygen supply is interrupted. Thus, maintaining heart function is crucial for survival. Several mechanisms have evolved that ensure the continuity and control of heartbeat. Some cardiac muscle cells are self-existable, meaning they contract without any signal from the nervous system, even if removed from the heart and placed in tissue culture. Each of these cells has its own intrinsic contraction rhythm. How are their contractions coordinated in the intact heart? A region of the heart called the Sinoatrial Node or SA node or pacemaker sets the rate and timing at which all cardiac muscle cells contract. Composite of specialized muscle tissue, the SA or sinoatrial node is located in the wall of the right atrium, near the point where the superior vena cava enters the heart, because the pacemaker of the human heart and of the other vertebrates is made up of specialized muscle tissues and located within the heart itself. The vertebrate heart is referred to as a myogenic heart. In contrast, the pacemakers of most arthropods' hearts originate in motor nerves arising from the outside, an arrangement called a neurogenic heart. The SA node generates electrical impulses much like those produced by nerve cells. Because cardiac muscle cells are electrical coupled by the articulated discs between adjacent cells, impulses from the SA nodes spread rapidly through the walls of the atria, causing both atria to contract in unison, as shown in this figure. The impulses also pass to another region of specialized cardiac muscle tissue, a relay point called the atrioventricular AV node. Atrioventricular AV node located in the wall between the right atrium and right ventricle. Here the impulses are delayed for about 0.1 second before spreading to the walls of the ventricles. The delay ensures that the atria empty completely before the ventricles contract. Specialized muscle fibers called bundle branches and Purkinje fibers that conduct the signals to the apex of the heart and through the ventricular walls. The impulses that travel through cardiac muscle during the heart cycle produce electrical currents that are conducted through body fluids to the skin, where the currents can be detected by electrodes and recorded as an electrocardiograms, ECG or EKG. The SA node sets the tempo for the entire heart, but it is influenced by a variety of physiological cues. Two sets of nerves affect a heart rate. One set speeds up the pacemaker and the other set slows it down. Heart rate is a compromise regulated by the opposing actions of these two sets of nerves. The pacemaker is also influenced by hormones secreted into the blood by glands. For example, epinephrine, the fight or flight hormone secreted by the adrenal glands, increase heart rate. Body temperature is another factor that affects the pacemaker. An increase of only 1 Celsius raises the heart rate by about 10 beats per minute. This is the reason your pulse increases substantially when you have a fever. Heart rate also increases with exercise and adaptation that enables the circulatory system to provide the additional O2 needed by muscles hard at work. Physical principles govern blood circulation. Blood delivers nutrients and removes waste throughout an animal's body. These functions are made possible by the circulatory system, a branching network of vessels similar in some ways to the plumbing system that delivers fresh water to a city and removes the city's wastes. The same physical principles that govern the operation of such plumbing systems also influence the functioning of animal circulatory systems. Blood vessel structure and function. The infrastructure of the circulatory system consists of its network of blood vessels. All blood vessels are built of similar tissues. The walls of both arteries and veins, for instance, have three similar layers as shown in this figure. One of the outside, a layer of connective tissue with elastic fibers, allows the vessel to stretch and recoil, as shown in this figure. Notice that. A middle layer contains smooth muscle and more elastic fibers lining the lumen of all blood vessels, including capillaries, is an endothelium, a single layer of flattened cells that provides a smooth surface that minimizes resistance to the flow of blood. Structural differences correlate with the different functions of arteries, veins, and capillaries. Capillaries lack the notice two outer layers, and their very thin walls consists only of endothelium and its basement membrane. This facilitates the exchange of substances between the blood and the interstitial fluid that bathes the cells. Arteries have thicker middle and the outer layers than veins. Blood flows through the vessels of the circulatory system at an even speed and pressure. The thicker walls of arteries provide strength to accommodate blood pumped rapidly and at high pressure by the heart, and their um, elasticity helps maintain blood pressure even when the heart relaxes between contractions. The thinner walled veins convey blood back to the heart at low velocity and pressure. Blood flows through the veins mainly as a result of muscle action. Whenever you move your skeletal muscles, squeeze your veins and push blood through them, as shown in this figure. Within large veins, flaps of tissue act as one-way valves that allow blood to flow only toward the heart. Blood flow velocity. Blood travels over 1,000 times faster in the aorta, about 30 centimeters each second on average, than in capillaries, about 0.026 centimeters each second. This velocity change follows from the law of continuity, which describes fluid movement through pips. If a pip's diameter changes over its length, a fluid follows through narrower segments of the pip faster than it follows through wider segments. Since the volume of flow per second must be constant through the entire pip, the fluid must flow faster as the cross-sectional area of the pip narrows. Think of the velocity of water squirted by a horse with and without a nozzle. Based on the law of continuity, you might think that blood should travel faster through capillaries than through arteries because the diameter of capillaries is very small. However, it is the total cross-sectional area of capillaries that determines flow rate. Each artery conveys blood to such an enormous number of capillaries that the total cross-sectional area is much greater in capillary beds than in any other part of the circulatory system. For this reason, the blood flows substantially as it enters the arterioles from arteries, and it slows further still in the capillary beds. Capillaries are the only vessels with walls thin enough to permit the transfer of substances between the blood and interstitial fluid, and the slower flow of blood through these tiny vessels enhances this exchange. As blood leaves the capillaries and enters the venules and veins, it speeds up again as a result of the reduction in total cross-sectional area. As shown in this figure, blood pressure. Fluids exert a force called a hydrostatic pressure against the surfaces they contact, and it is that pressure that drives fluid through pipes. Fluids follow from areas of higher pressure to areas of lower pressure. The hydrostatic pressure that blood exerts against the wall of a vessel and that propels the blood is called blood pressure. Blood pressure is much greater in arteries than in veins and is highest in arteries when the heart contracts during ventricular systolic pressure. Notice this figure. When you take your pulse by placing your fingers in your wrist, you can feel an artery bulge with each heartbeat. The surge of pressure is partly due to the narrow opening of arterioles impeding the exit of blood from the arteries. Thus, when the heart contracts, blood enters the arteries faster than it can leave, and the vessels stretch from the pressure. The elastic walls of the arteries snap back during diastole, but the heart contracts again before enough blood has flowed into the arterioles to completely relieve pressure in the arteries. Notice this diagram show the interrelationship of blood flow, velocity, cross-sectional area of blood vessels, and blood pressure. This impedance by the arterioles is called peripheral resistance as a consequence of the elastic arteries working against peripheral resistance. There is a substantial blood pressure even during diastole. Diastolic pressure and blood continuously flows into arterioles and capillaries, as shown in this figure. Notice that. The arterial blood pressure of a healthy 20 years old human at rest oscillates between about 120 millimeter Hg milliliters of mercury, a unit of pressure, at systole, and about 70 millimeter Hg at diastole. Blood pressure is determined partly by cardiac output and partly by peripheral resistance. Contraction of smooth muscles in the walls of the arterioles reduces the diameter of the tiny vessels, increases peripheral resistance, and therefore increases blood pressure upstreams in the arteries. When the smooth muscles relax, the arterioles dilate, increase their diameter. Consequently, blood flow through the arterioles increases and pressure in the arteries falls. Nerve impulses, hormones, and other signals control these arterioles wall muscles. Stress, either physical or emotional, can raise blood pressure by triggering nervous and hormonal responses that constrict blood vessels. Cardiac output is adjusted in coordination with changes In peripheral resistance, this coordination of regulatory mechanisms maintains adequate blood flow as the body's demands on the circulatory system change. During heavy exercise, for example, the arterioles in walking muscles dilate. This response admits a greater flow of oxygen-rich blood to the muscles and also decreases peripheral resistance by itself. This would cause a drop in blood pressure and therefore blood flow in the body as a whole. However, cardiac output increases, maintaining blood pressure and supporting the necessary increase in blood flow. In large land animals, another factor that affects blood pressure is gravity. Besides the force needed to overcome peripheral resistance, additional pressure is necessary to push blood above the level of the heart. In a standing human, blood must rise about 0.35 meter or to get from the heart to the brain. This demands an extra 27 millimeter Hg of pressure, which requires the heart to expend more energy in its contraction cycle. This pumping challenge is significantly greater for animals with long necks. A standing giraffe, for example, needs to pump blood as much as 2.5 meter above the heart. That requires about 190 millimeter Hg of additional blood pressure in the left ventricle, and a giraffe's normal systolic pressure near the heart is over 250 millimeter Hg. Systolic pressure that high would be extremely dangerous in a human. Check um, valves and sinuses along with feedback mechanisms that reduce cardiac output prevents this high pressure from damaging the giraffe's brain when it lowers its head to drink. A body position that causes blood to follow downhill almost 2 meters from the heart, adding an extra 150 millimeter Hg of blood pressure in the arteries leading to the brain. Physiologists speculate about blood pressure and cardiovascular adaptations in a dinosaur, some of which had necks almost 100 meter long, which would have required a systolic pressure of nearly 760 millimeter Hg to pump blood to the brain when the head was fully raised. But evidence indicates that dinosaurs probably did not have hearts powerful enough to generate such pressures. Based on this analysis and on studies of neck bone structure, some biologists have concluded that the long-necked dinosaurs fed close to the ground rather than raising their head to feed on high foliage. By the time blood reaches the veins, its pressure is not affected, much more the action of the heart. This is because the blood encounters so much resistance as it passes through the millions of tiny arterioles and capillaries that the pressure generated by the pumping heart has been dissipated and can no longer propel the blood through the veins. How does the blood return to the heart, especially when it must travel from the lower extremities against gravity? Rhythmic contractions of smooth muscles in the walls of venules and veins account for some movement of the blood. More importantly, the activity of skeletal muscles during exercise squeezes blood through the veins. Also, when we inhale the change in pressure within the thoracic chest cavity causes the vena cava and other large veins near the heart to expand and fill with the blood.